This is Awareness Explorers.
Welcome back, fellow explorers, to Awareness Explorers. I'm excited today because this is our 200th episode. Woohoo!
Yay!
I'm Jonathan Robinson with my friend and trusty co-host.
Brian Tom O'Connor.
And who would have thought, I don't know, 7-8 years ago that we'd be hitting episode 200? So we decided to do something special, and hopefully you'll find it useful. We were thinking about what to do, and episode 100 we kind of did a retrospective, so I thought we'd do a similar thing, but with 200 episodes, that's a lot of material there. So being that this is now the age of AI, I decided to ask ChatGPT, and this was the prompt I gave it. I said, I'd like you to review all the episodes of Awareness Explorers podcast and summarize the 15 recurring themes and most practical tips provided for helping people awaken to their true nature. And ChatGPT thought of it for about 4,000 years, which in computer time equaled 13 seconds. And then it said, amazing project. It's somewhat of a sycophant, I think. But I reviewed the Awareness Explorers feed and episodes to pull out the patterns that show up again and again and the concrete practices you two keep returning to. Here are the 15 big recurring themes, plus the most actionable tips listeners can use right away. And as is often the case when I ask ChatGPT, I am floored with its ability to do certain things. One thing it cannot yet do is be conscious, as far as we know, Brian. So that's we still have a little bit of a head start there.
I'm not so sure it's not.
Yeah, I'm not so sure either, but hopefully that's the case. Before we go into Brian and I discussing those 15 themes and the most practical tips, I do want to put a shout out to our Patreon supporters. They do make this possible to all the listeners. So if you want extra stuff and you want to support the podcast, go to patreon.com/awareness explorers. And I appreciate you, Brian, for putting out extra interviews, articles, all kinds of stuff, including for the first time I saw the thing where you said, do not click on this button in your email to our Patreon supporters. I was wondering, I wonder what that's about. Well, if you want to find out what that's about, you're going to have to be a Patreon supporter. So we'll leave it a little bit as a mystery, but thanks for doing that. I found that very funny. Anyways, so, one of the most fundamental things, obviously, Brian, is remembering awareness. And of course, we've talked about that ad nauseum. But being that when you're in awareness, everything is new, what do you have to say about remembering yourself as the ever-present background of awareness?
Well, that's really the key to it all. And remembering is, I think of it as noticing something that's already and always there. Locke Kelly says, remember to remember, bringing your attention from the content of awareness to the background in which all perceptions and thoughts and feelings and sensations appear.
Yeah, and I think what is helpful is, of course, we're trying to find the methods, the phrases, the cues, whatever, the alarm clocks, basically, to help us remember. And I set simple reminders like, I have a beeper on my phone, but I also like simple phrases that you've come up with, like your raw phrase, which you can talk about, but I like the phrase, be the space, not the story.
Yeah, I like that too. Because the story is what's veiling the space, and the space is there and choiceless. It allows everything to appear in it like a clear mirror.
Yeah, I like the idea that the story is like just kind of floating in the space. We think of it as floating in our head, which it is, but it's really our head is floating in the space as well. So if you know the headless method. So, I just kind of picture everything's floating in this space, including my concepts of me, my problems, my thoughts, and what's it floating in? It's floating in awareness.
That's right. Anything that you can name, anything that you can conceive of is known by awareness, including your idea of what awareness is. So it's
Yes.
kind of an infinite regression that can only end when you have a wordless, felt sense of that pure background of awareness. And you can, A, sort of marinate in it, which is Locke Kelly's term again, and then identify with it and just be it.
And part of Locke Kelly's idea, which we also talk about a lot, are short glimpses many times a day.
Yep, that's key.
I've noticed that creates a momentum that if you do short glimpses throughout the day, when you meditate or when you are trying to make another glimpse, it gets easier over time.
I find that too. It
Hmm.
becomes kind of second nature. And it also takes the pressure off. We have this idea that what we need to do is meditate for a certain amount of time to achieve a certain result. And that actually isn't the paradigm that that actually works here. It is sort of dropping all effort and noticing just what's happening now, what is. It's now, and it can only be experienced now.
Yeah, too bad awareness has no shelf life. Oh well. Okay, a second theme that's come up a lot is slowing down or deaccelerating. And once again, that kind of is the momentum thing that, if you're worrying a lot, it's harder to see yourself as awareness. We've talked about even slowing your walking down, also taking mini breaks between tasks, maybe even a couple of breaths while first sit in a chair or sit in your car. The slowing down idea, you can be very aware while thinking, but it's harder when your mind is going a million miles an hour.
Yeah, yeah. And the idea of slowing your mind, I think an interesting way to do this, and a lot of people talk about it, is to see if you can notice the space between thoughts or even the space between words, because thoughts are words going through your head. Notice them and notice the space in between them.
Deepak Chopra talks about that a lot, and we've been blessed to be able to speak to pretty much everybody we've wanted to, except for Eckhart Tolle, who's hard to get hold of. Eckhart, if you're out there, feel free to call us. But, you know, I remember Deepak saying that like 30 years ago, and I tried it, and none of that has ever worked for me in the slightest. And one of the tenets of our podcast is that different things work for different people. So when you hear something and you go, yeah, that's not working for me, just go on to the next thing. And that's worked for us, I think.
Yeah, me too. I mean, there are certain things that work for other people that don't work for me. And you are the expert. You have to be.
I
You are
like to
the
think
only
so.
one who knows your inside.
Yeah. And, we recently did a nice episode on gurus, to guru or not to guru. That is the question. And one of the conclusions we came up with is that one of the disadvantages of gurus is that we often think that they're the expert on us, but really you're the expert on your own experience, and you have to take anything that's said and say, does this work for me?
Yeah, yeah. But I wouldn't say that you automatically give up on something if you tried three times and it doesn't work. You know, you give it a good chance. Like if you're trying self-inquiry and it just doesn't work for you, maybe it's because you're expecting an answer. Maybe it's because you're expecting an outcome. And I find that not expecting an outcome and letting go of any intention whatsoever is actually the way. So sometimes if you try a method and it doesn't work, ask yourself, am I doing this in order to achieve such and such, as opposed to totally allowing my current experience to be exactly as it is?
Hmm. Yeah. Now, along those lines of, if something's working or not, I've found that sometimes something didn't work a few years ago and now it does. And the opposite, that's something, and that's even more damaging because people might, do the same religious or spiritual activity for decades. And at one time it worked, 20 years ago, and now it's just a mechanical routine and we forget to change it up. And I think that when you understand that sometimes, a method ran its course, you did what you could with it, and now it's time to do something else.
Yeah, that's right.
So number three was thinking less or noticing thought. ChatGPT said, label thoughts as thinking and return to new sensations. And in a lot of these, I noticed that there's a lot of emphasis on returning to new sensations of the body in the moment, because the body is always present in some way, even if the mind is not. But just labeling stuff as a method to go back to the present, thinking, worrying, complaining. I notice I have a lot of little complaining thoughts throughout the day.
Sure.
And I've been able to cut them back by just saying, complaining, blah, 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 complaining. It's too cold, it's too hot, the dogs are barking too much, or whatever it is. And rather than spend 30 seconds thinking about it, I might spend 5 seconds because I just say, complaining, like
Well,
that.
blah, blah, blah is one of my favorite methods of yours.
Yes, yes. Well, you got to say it just right. It's
Blah,
like
blah, blah.
it's like special Sanskrit, the vibration. So it goes like this.
Yes.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yes, that does have that tonality, that special vibration.
That vibration that really gets it deep into the brain.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So a fourth one here is letting go and releasing resistance. So you've talked about some ways of doing that I like in relationship to the breath, like on the out breath, say soften, or talk about how you've connected that to breathing and other things.
I don't recall that. Is that one of mine?
It was a different part of you from way past, but since we're new every moment, you might not remember it. What I remember out of it is that you might say like something on the in breath and something on the out breath to deal with emotions. Does that sound familiar?
Um, could be, could be. I mean, the practice of I am I've always used, often used a I on the in breath and am on the out breath to bring attention to the sense of being. But in terms of emotion, what I found most helpful is the include method, which is if you're
Mm-hmm.
having an emotion you don't want, ask what else is in awareness right now. There's the
Mm-hmm.
feeling of your butt on the chair. There's the sound of the wind or the birds outside. There's everything that you can imagine you include. You take an inventory, and the more you include that you are aware of right now, the smaller the emotion becomes in proportion to everything else that you're experiencing.
Yeah, I love that method. I give it to a lot of my clients who are experiencing trauma of different kinds. And what trauma does is it makes you hyper aware of one specific thing, the most disturbing thing. And a year and a half ago, I experienced a kind of a trauma, and I was kind of obsessing on it. And I would use the include method, and it was incredibly useful. I call it the and also method. So I'm
Good.
aware of feeling very fearful now, and also I'm aware that this tree that I'm looking at is very green, and also I'm aware of the quiet in the room, and also and it would take that fear and it would lessen it with each and also thing I did. And really, that's a great little release method. It works in a diabolical way. And really anybody can do it as well. So it's not like it's only useful for people who are into non-dual stuff.
Yeah, but I did sort of take it away from your question about breath. And so I just want to add a couple of just one comment about breath and tie it also to body awareness. The thing about breath, you can always stop and notice your breath. because thoughts are all about the past and all about the future and all about problems that need to be solved. But the breath, when you just simply notice it without words, without story, it's always now. And the same way with any body sensation, they are experienced now and they can be experienced wordlessly without story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that takes me to another one of my favorite methods of yours. Someday you're going to be known as like the great inventor of spiritual methods. You know, your two books, Awareness Games and Awareness Adventures, are just full of creative ideas that way. But the method, let's see if I can remember it now.
You were
Oh,
talking,
go on.
were you talking about wordlessness or were you
Yeah,
talking?
yeah,
Yeah.
wordlessness. I became wordless during that little brain episode. Um, yeah, that's one of my favorite methods too, because we're born into wordlessness. So it's not a something that you achieve. It's going back to our most basic nature. And it's so immediate. Like when I tap into wordlessness, everything becomes immediately different in a very subtle way, but very noticeable way as well. So thank you for that.
Well, I'm glad, but I do have to say I'm not always the inventor. Sometimes I'm simply the borrower or the paraphraser,
Yeah, yeah.
because a lot of these I've been out there for centuries, and most of them are based on good old-fashioned self-inquiry. I, what is
Hmm.
I?
Hmm. Number five in our exploration of the 15 most common themes according to ChatGPT is meeting difficult emotions. And this is the summary it gives. Drop the storyline, locate the emotion in the body, and allow it for 30 seconds. Offer affectionate attention, such as, "You can be here." Then resense the entire body.
Sri GPT. Very wise. Sure. Couldn't have put it better.
Yeah, I was just at the Journey retreat where we interviewed Stephen Zerfas of that a while back, and they have a phrase which I liked, which is, "Friend, you are welcome here." So they suggested saying that during difficult emotions, "Oh, friend, you're welcome here,"
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is very different than how we might normally experience sadness or anger or whatever.
Exactly. Which is usually what can I do to make this go away?
Yeah.
And you are welcome. Allow it, feel it in the body, drop the story about it. Yeah, just that description you said. And the other thing I would add about it that I found useful is as a reminder. Every time I had a feeling I didn't want, I use that as a reminder to say, in what is this appearing?
Mm. Yeah, that can, what effect does that have on you when you do that?
Well, I drop back into that space that allows it to be here, that wordless emptiness. And what happens is identifying with that unconditional allowing is like identifying with unconditional love. And it brings
Mm.
me joy. It just bubbles up. And the problem no longer becomes something to solve, but just something that is experienced by something that loves it and everything.
Mm. Would you say that that's made your difficult emotions much less or much less lengthy in terms of how they land in your body?
It makes it much less, it makes it less lengthy.
Hmm.
It also, because you're using it as a reminder, it makes them more welcome in a strange way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's great.
It's a step to the growth, or growth isn't really the right word, but movement towards your true nature, which is already allowing and acceptance.
I'm curious as to how you used that as a reminder. Like, did that happen naturally? Did it happen because you were in a lot of pain? What created that association of difficult emotions lead to the reminder of what's this all in?
Well, I used to use other reminders, like every time I walk down a long hallway, because, I worked in an office building for many years. I live in an apartment building, and other little reminders, like every time I, went into a bookstore or whatever. And then I had a lot of emotions I didn't want. And one day I was sitting down meditating, and I realized that the reason I was meditating was to get rid of what I was feeling. What would happen if I didn't try and get rid of it? If I had no agenda to change anything and just allow it to be completely there? And since that worked so well, I said, well, what if I just use every time I feel bad as a little reminder to turn my attention towards the background of awareness?
It's brilliant. There's being that we have 100 small little negative emotions a day. If you can turn your emotions into a reminder, you're you're going to be in very good shape.
Yeah, and it helps kind of make it second nature as opposed, and this is going back to the small glimpses many times, as
Hmm.
opposed to this major effort that you have to do.
Right. That's great. Theme number 6. What is enlightenment? Or what does enlightenment awakening point to? And, when I was doing my book, The Enlightenment Project, and we asked various people this question, I was surprised at the level of sameness in the answers. You know, with a lot of things, you get a lot of different answers. You ask somebody, what is beauty? You might get 10 different answers. I thought when we would ask people what actually is enlightenment or awakening, we'd get a lot of answers, but there seemed to be an agreement that's basically a shift of identity from personality or person to the aware presence. And that I thought was really key because at least if we can agree on the goal, we might be able to agree on how to get there.
Absolutely. I think that's a really wonderful description. But thinking of it as a goal and something to get to can be sometimes an obstacle.
Hmm.
It is noticing something that's already here. But you're right, the shift in identity is key. But you don't have to shift it. You don't have to bring in the identity from outside.
Hmm.
It's a noticing, it's a turning inwards and noticing that there's something that already allows, that's already here.
Yeah. There's times where I can see this in action where there's kind of a tipping point where my identity does shift from being a Jonathan to being awareness.
Yeah.
Normally I'm going back and forth many times a day. My identity is mostly in Jonathan and his story, but there are times after retreat or after meditating where that just kind of disappears or certainly doesn't seem very important because the awareness identity is getting enough attention,
Yeah.
and it's really fun when that happens. I imagine it must be kind of fun when that's a permanent shift.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. However, I don't worry about anymore. I used to. I don't worry anymore about whether it's a permanent shift because what happened for me was I noticed that this sense of identity as a separate Brian is just another appearance in the larger identity of pure awareness. I call it
Hmm.
little me and the big I. And the
Hmm.
little me doesn't have to disappear for the big I to be experienced, to be known, to be identified with, and to realize that it is you and always was and always will be, and it's already here.
Hmm. Yeah, well said. So we're already up to number 7 here, and that is the head and heart integration. Balance clear seeing with warmth, and it's suggested maybe placing a hand on the heart while resting as awareness. And I think we've actually talked about this that you can awaken, some people do awaken without that sense of heart integration, and that doesn't look good. And some people get very heart oriented without awakening. So they are kind of two different tracks. Or at least that's my opinion. There's certainly overlap. Most people who do awaken end up being very kind and serviceful, but not always.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I can't explain how there could be someone who is awakened and not kind and loving. It it I would question whether they are or not.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Ken Wilber talks about lines of development. It might be that they're just not very socially aware, or who knows, but I certainly integrating awakening with heart is something that the Buddhists do a lot with, various meditations and such. And I think if you go deep enough into awakening, you definitely have an open heart most of the time. And if you go deep enough into heart, you probably are most of the time very awake. But on the edges, that's not always the case.
Yeah, maybe. I remember my first teacher, Pamela Wilson, used to have a method called the cave of the heart.
And what
And
was that?
she would just bring us into that space inside.
Uh-huh.
It's not the physical heart, it's that open space in the center of our being.
Hmm.
And I probably am not doing it justice. I would recommend, if anyone is interested, maybe Google Pamela Wilson in the Cave of the Heart, and maybe you'll find her description. I think she is one of the most beautiful teachers out there.
Or maybe ChatGPT, Pamela Wilson, The Cave of the Heart. Be interesting to see if they have different descriptions.
That would be interesting.
Yeah. Number 8 on our list was intuition and wise decision making. And according to ChatGPT, it said this is a review of our sense of that. After gathering facts, sit 60 seconds in silence and notice the whole body, yes or no. If unclear, choose the kindest next small step.
Yes, I don't recall us talking about the whole body feeling, but I resonate with that. I understand that. But I do recognize the take the next do the next right thing to do,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
And I do believe in intuition very much.
Yeah, when making big decisions, I will get quiet and then I will imagine the two or more choices and listen to what feels like a yes in my body.
Yeah.
And for people who have that ability, it's really a great way of deciding things. The mind, a lot of times people try to decide everything by their mind, pros and cons, and usually it's like 50-50, so they go crazy. I'm working with a client now, and she's trying to decide whether to move or not. And she said that she's been thinking about this for several years,
Yeah.
you know?
I know. What I do is I weigh all the pros and cons, which tend to equal out each other, and then I
Yeah.
drop it and
Yeah.
wait for the decision to come.
Yeah, that's like asking for a sign or just a knowing in
No,
in
I don't
your
usually ask for a
body.
sign. I just wait. And all of a sudden, inside, there's this voice that says, ah, decision made.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. That's great. I sometimes ask for a sign. Sometimes I do know what you mean where it's I drop it and then the next day, oh, it's really clear what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, yeah. But when we had our intuition episode, there was one thing that we did point out. Different people are different in terms of intuition. There are people who rely on their intuition and it doesn't really help them very much because they haven't actually thought through in any intelligent way. So if you follow your intuition and you're always getting into jams, maybe you might be the type of person who needs to have a more logical approach. And on the other hand, if you are the person who's always in your head and everything is all story and it's conflicting and you can never decide, then you're the type of person who needs to quiet that down and look in the inner self for the intuition. So there's two extremes and two different types of people. So you really need to kind of sense which you are and what you need.
Yeah, that's really well said. Often, if you fall on one side of the line, then growth is on the other side.
Often, yeah.
Yeah. Number 9 here, intention and commitment to practice. Begin each day with a 5-word intention. I wonder if we actually said 5-word intention, but and it said rest as love and listen. Tie a practice to a daily cue, such as doorways, lights, or whatever. So we talked a fair amount about getting clear on your intention and having a good why. Like, why are we doing this? And it has to be pretty deep in there because there's so many distractions. I was listening to a Tony Robbins things yesterday, and he said that you should do like 7 levels of why. So, why are you listening to this podcast? Well, because I'm trying to awaken. Well, why do you want to awaken? Because, and you keep doing this, and eventually you get to something that's like really core, really deep. And what's the exact experience you're really most wanting? And that sometimes gets lost, in words or our busyness. And it's going to be a different thing for everybody. It might be you want to serve your kids or make the world a better place, or you love the feeling of serving a higher power, or who knows.
Sure, but
Um,
even those can be you can ask why to
yeah,
even those. I mean, for me, it usually comes down to happiness, but that's a that's a topic that, some people don't resonate with that word. I do.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I hadn't done it in a while, and my answer as I did this yesterday was different than it was a couple of years ago. So it made me feel more aligned in that way.
Yeah, but I have one more thing to say about intention because I find that to be one of the most paradoxical elements
Hmm.
of this practice. It seems to be that when you have a clear intention, that seems to be required to do the work. To I shouldn't say do the work, but to not just get sidetracked with irrelevant things and with the story of your life and the problems of your life. You need a clear intention to make this an important part of your life, maybe the most important part. But the
Hmm.
paradox is, and this is my experience, for me, the first awakening that I had happened when I dropped any intention whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah. And we talked about that, like it's a double-edged sword where you want to have an intention, but your intention can also block the simple recognition of beingness.
Right.
I do a lot of what's called sinking in meditation now, where you just sink into your current experience. But unfortunately, it's been mapped out as you do that. There's all these different level of jhanas or locations in Jeffrey Martin's thing. So I'm always thinking, well, okay, I haven't gone to the 4th jhana yet. I need to really, sink in deeper. And that idea of trying to get somewhere else from other than where we are is a block.
Yeah, I think so.
So it is a paradox, and what I do in my mind is I say, let's up the gratitude for the exact experience I'm having now. And that tends to either make me enjoy the current experience or it tends to deepen the experience into something else. But it's a battle inside to find that little balance between intention without creating an obstacle to presence.
Yeah, I think love and gratitude are good ways towards that. One of mine is when in doubt, love.
Yeah. Or feel gratitude for what is.
Yep.
Yeah. Number 10 on our ChatGPT list of Awareness Explorer's greatest hits is that there's, I'm not even sure what this means. I'll read it. Multiple doors of perception. If a pointer stalls, switch doors, breath, sound, open-eyed, soft focus, or self-inquiry. Keep a personal menu of 5 go-to practices. Do you have that like a menu of your best go-to practices?
Yeah, I do. I don't know if they're static, if they're the same all the time, but I do because sometimes I'll sit down to meditate with a plan, how I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to do, and my plan isn't working. And I say, okay, well, let's try wordlessness. Okay, let's try slippery mind. Just, thoughts just come in and they can't gain any traction and they just slide out the other side. So that's why I made awareness games,
Mm-hmm.
as a matter of fact, is to have multiple things that when one's not working, try another. And
Yeah.
one thing that worked yesterday might not work today, and vice versa, or you last few minutes, and just be be flexible and improvisational and enjoy and have fun and play.
Mm-hmm. That's the games part of awareness games.
Yeah.
Um, I actually write down on a post-it note that I put on my computer the focus of the day. And so I have like 10 go-to practices, and I just choose one because if I'm always doing the same one, I guess I get bored and I like the variety. And they all work. It's just a matter of how much I'm reminded of it and actually do it. But it's helpful to see something. And since I'm at my computer a lot, today it's listen to silence. Okay, number 11, deepen through retreats. And it says, do mini retreats at home, such as 90 minutes with devices off, and try mindful walking, other ways of journaling about retreats or retreat spaces. Those are all good ideas. I think, I recently did this journey retreat where it was what's called a at-home work retreat. And they do retreats where you can be separate from everything, like you're at a hotel. But I wanted to do this one where it was interspersed with my work. So, we would meet like 9 a.m. on the phone for an hour, and we meet at like 5 p.m., on Zoom. And during the day, we'd have a regular day. And I thought that was a great way to do a retreat because it was more integrated. Have you ever tried that?
No, I've never tried that, but I like it. I think it's an interesting idea. And one thing about retreats that I often hear people say is that they go to a retreat and they feel wonderful, and then they go home and everything crashes and burns again. And but the thing about a retreat is that it's an opportunity to practice something without the normal distractions. It's an
Mm-hmm.
easier it's an easier environment to be silent and to allow. But what you need to do is extend the retreat to when you leave, to not have the idea that then your life will change, but instead, oh, here's here's stuff that I have now the opportunity to allow. And you need to start with the easy stuff and gradually allow the more difficult things.
Yeah, I think the next step for the retreat space is really focusing on integration. Some people go to like 10-day Vipassana retreats. I think it'd be better to do a 7-day Vipassana retreat, and then you spend 3 days slowly integrating into your life. Maybe moving at half speed or not doing any screens or something like that, so that you don't hit that wall where you just lose everything and then are going back to your normal life.
Yeah,
But
but the thing is that the idea that our normal life is something that's bad,
hmm
that's the problem.
hmm
Our normal life is what it is. Our idea that we have to fix, that can be dropped.
hmm Number 12, receiving subtle energies and transmissions. This is something, as I've said before, I'm proud of to introduce you to. You went from total skeptic to less skeptical. And and I think, whether you meditate in a group and you notice how it's easier there, or you meditate with a guru or somebody sending some kind of transmission, I think that's part of the spiritual path and awakening for a lot of people, and it certainly has been for me.
I think the key idea here is to be open, to be an open channel, to
Hmm.
allow all frequencies that are out there to be there. And if there is a frequency of love in a retreat or from a particular teacher, is to be as open as possible and allow
Hmm.
it in.
Yeah, yeah. And to allow yourself to be sensitive, whether it be to nature, which is giving off its vibration, or a person, or a book, that the vibration of love and peace is always available. And there are some forms of transmissions, whether it be a person or a song or a book or a group, that we can tune into to help us reach these exalted states.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. And it reminds me of one of my main practices. And I didn't used to equate this with a spiritual practice, but just as a trait of mine, which is appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
Just appreciation. And what I realized was that appreciation changes the sort of resistant mindset. It says, oh, this is a wonderful thing here, or possibly a wonderful thing. I can't believe this exists. So that you're in wonder, you're in awe, you're looking at the positive, and you're sort of quieting down that part of the mind that judges and excludes and resists.
Mm-hmm. How is appreciation, say, different than gratitude?
I think that gratitude is, I think they're very, very similar. And this may be simply personal. I find gratitude creates resistance in me. Oh,
Mm.
I'm very grateful for this thing that I really don't like having happened. I have to sort of trick myself into feeling grateful if I don't. Whereas appreciation, and again, this may be personal, seems to come naturally without effort. And I think that might just be part of the personality of the Brian character, that
Mm-hmm.
appreciation comes naturally and gratitude seems to require effort.
Mm-hmm. So if you're dealing with a person that's a little bit challenging, gratitude feels forced, but you can say, well, I do appreciate this about this person,
Yeah,
and that brings you to a similar place.
yeah, but even the practice of appreciating something that you really love, music, art, or science, or an invention, primes the pump.
Uh-huh.
The more
Yeah.
you appreciate something that you really love, it opens up that channel to start appreciating more and more things that maybe aren't so special, but you can appreciate everything when that channel is open.
Yeah, in my mind, I'm thinking that appreciation might be a smaller jump than gratitude. It's like a stepping stone that can get you to a higher place, whereas gratitude might be like trying to jump into the ocean from a distance.
That's the way it feels to me. But
Huh.
again, you all have to decide what's
Yeah,
good
what
for
works for
you.
you?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, number 13, metaphors for everyday life integration, such as the sky and the clouds or the movie screen. And we've had a couple of fun times trying to think of new metaphors for awakening. I remember that episode, and it was kind of fun. But, trying to practice these or have these metaphors in mind while we are doing things as a way to help us be aware of the background, which is also a metaphor.
Yep. Yep. And I think the oldies but goodies are the goodies. The wave in the ocean metaphor. We think we're separate wave, but we're actually part of the ocean. The
Hmm.
clouds in the sky, when we realize that clouds appear in the sky, but they don't actually affect the sky. And the pure background of awareness is like that. like the sky in which clouds and storms appear and disappear, or the movie screen that's actually not affected by the content or the story of the movie that's on it.
Yeah, yeah. Those are all really helpful. Number 14, the middle way and balancing opposites. And that's been kind of in the last bunch of episodes. It wasn't in our first 100, but we live in a very polarized society, and there's like a magnet to the extremes. And we talk about how sanity and truth tend to be somewhere in the middle. And it's important to be aware of our tendency to see things in black and white instead of as a whole or in somewhere in between the extremes.
Yeah. And lately I've been thinking of all existence as a kind of a pendulum or a vibration of energy from one side to another, that the still center is the middle way, but the
Hmm.
vibration is always there.
Yeah, yeah. Since I work, in the coaching and therapy business, I see so many people create unnecessary suffering by seeing things in black and white terms.
Yeah,
It seems to be a product of our mind, and obviously it's a product of our culture now of seeing everything through uh, people are either uh, good or evil, or they're for us or against us. And what's interesting is that the world does not ever really fit into those extremes. So it's when you start to see that everything's part of a continuum, like the radio spectrum or other things, light spectrum, you're able to just see things a lot more accurately.
I agree. And it's also helpful to know that that black and white thinking, the key word there is thinking.
Yeah, right.
Thinking is what creates our ideas of good and bad, should and shouldn't, left and right. And it, at least it's useful sometimes. It's, like the old saying, thought is a good servant, but a poor master. It can be useful in practical ways. But in terms of our emotional health and our spiritual health, it usually is not sending us in the right direction.
Quite true. And last but not least, from our 15 greatest hits, I can't get no satisfaction. No, oh, that's a rock and roll hit. Right. It applies to awareness when we're not aware. But ChatGPT said, staying sane with bad news in a busy world. That really we have a challenging task. Luckily, we have all the great methods now available to us all, but the amount of distraction and suffering in our face is probably more intense than ever as well.
Right.
And that you have to have like a strategy doing for being sane, and a strategy for how to handle all the news, and a strategy for how to handle all the suffering. And that's part of the awakening process.
Yeah, I think Eckhart Tolle had the right idea with the power of now. What's here right now? Is there a problem right now? I'm sitting in a chair. I am comfortable. If I don't think about what's going on, or if I don't think about what's right and what's wrong, what should or shouldn't be, is there a problem right now? And who would I be without a problem to solve?
Hmm. What's the name of that Sailor Bob book? What's the problem with right now? Is that the name of it?
Yeah, the full title is
Oh, if you don't think about it.
What's Wrong with Right Now, Unless You Think About It.
Right, right. Yeah.
My favorite book title.
Hmm. That's a lot of wisdom, which we've been able to extract from many wonderful, wise teachers. And I'm wondering if there's anything that's majorly surprised you as we've done this.
Uh, the only thing that surprised me was that there were a few things that I didn't remember that we ever talked about. But the gist of it, no, it didn't surprise
Yeah. I'm always surprised by how ChatGPT can listen to 200 episodes and come up with the 15 most important or recurring themes in 13 seconds. And it makes me think that I was listening to some AI expert, and he said as AI becomes more powerful, our basic humanness will become more important because as things become more mechanical, the desire for actual humanity, empathy, connection, the things that we as humans can do that AI can't do, will become a little bit more valued. And I hope that that's the case.
I certainly hope that's true too.
Yeah.
The
Any
other
last
thing,
thoughts? Go
yeah,
ahead.
I did. I do have some last thoughts because when we were approaching our 200th episode and you were talking about possibly recapping, I asked myself, what are my key principles of awareness practices? And so I wrote them down and I was hoping that I might read them for our listeners.
Sounds good. I'd love that.
I tried to boil them down. And one note before I start is that even though we're based in non dual spirituality, there are a couple of parts of my summary that involve two movements or two steps. But I think they're necessary, but they end up pointing to unity in the end.
Hmm.
So here goes Brian's key principles of awareness. First, the real you, your true nature, is not your body, mind, or personality. The real you is what all perceptions, sensations, thoughts, and feelings appear in. It is unnameable and indescribable because all names, descriptions, and concepts appear in it, and it is choiceless, like a clear mirror. It allows whatever appears, and that is unconditional love, which is your true nature. So it's not the individual that has to allow, it is pure awareness that is already allowing. Second, the two steps to meditation or awareness practice. One, allow everything to be as it is. Two, shift attention from the content of awareness to awareness itself, which is the background in which all experience appears. Third, the two movements to oneness. One, turn your attention to awareness, as in step 2 above, and be awareness. That is, identify as the nameless beingness that knows all experience. 2, look out from awareness as awareness and see that nothing has ever or could ever appear outside of awareness, and therefore see that all is awareness. In other words, you. Fourth, happiness is our default state, but it's veiled by thinking about the past and the future and the problems of the person. When we ignore these thoughts and let go of all manipulation of our experience, happiness, our true nature, reveals itself. And finally, I'd like to offer two quotes. One is Rupert Spira's elegant summation of the essential message of the perennial philosophy. Quote, happiness is the nature of our being, and we share our being with everyone and everything. End quote. And even more succinct is Adyashanti's instruction, no manipulation. So that's my summary for episode 200.
A worthy summary. And actually, that can serve as our meditation for the day.
Sure.
I was following you along and just kind of riding those waves.
Good, good, good.
Well, it's been a great joy to be able to do this. I hope we get to keep doing it for a couple hundred more episodes, God willing.
It
And
was fun.
yeah, yeah. And, you know, Adyashanti once said his definition of spirituality is constant discovery. And I felt like as we've done this, you and I have been able to use our childlike curiosity to keep on exploring,
Yep.
keep on learning. And I've really enjoyed that we come from just slightly different views, which have, I think, benefited both our listeners and ourselves in exploring deeper and wider.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said.
P.S. While editing this episode, I suddenly remembered the breath technique for emotions that Jonathan was asking about. It's just that it doesn't involve the in-breath and the out-breath, just the in-breath. It's called inhale the emotion. In this simple game, you don't have to get rid of an emotion, and you don't have to accept it either. You don't have to allow it, and you don't have to transform it. You don't have to convince yourself that it's okay if it never goes away. You simply have to inhale it. When you feel an emotion, do this. Notice the emotion, inhale the emotion. Repeat as needed. You don't even have to worry about exhaling the emotion, because that might feel like you're trying to get rid of it. In this game, you're not trying to get rid of it. You're not trying to do anything with it other than inhale it, draw it into you. Simple as that. Inhale the emotion.
And to our listeners, as we always say, thanks for listening and keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. We'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link on Facebook and with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.